Alright, so check this out. I've used cheat codes before. A few years ago, I increased my income by almost 50%. I beat a lawyer in a legal battle, nearly doubled my credit score, and got a lot of other glorious crap done by running cheat codes. I was doing affirmations, creative visualization, studying wealth mindset, and doing lucid dreaming. But then I hit a brick wall. I refinanced my home, cutting the interest rate in half, but now I have to pay an extra $300 per month, and the cost of living went up by 19% in the last few years. So I'm back to living paycheck to paycheck and using a credit card to cover the shortfalls. I've fallen into a mind-numbing depression because I feel like I grind 52 hours a week and commute 10 hours a week for nothing. So, this week, I returned to my old practices. Affirmations, vigilant and deliberate in my thoughts, remembering my dreams, and being deliberate during the hypnagogic stage, which is that stage of actually falling asleep. Today, I'm on the treadmill to boost endorphins and get out a low tide. I'm listening to some lecture on thoughts, and then it comes to me to sell my old trashy car for honestly reasons too long to list here. I look up the Blue Book value and also start searching for parts that I need to fix it enough to sell it. But the website needs specifics about the engine. So, I go outside and I pop the hood. I discover that my oil cap is missing and there's oil all over the engine. It must have been loose and fell out. And that oil could have caught fire, or my engine could have been destroyed if I had driven it anywhere today. But my chain of thought led me to checking the engine. And the train of thought came from getting on the treadmill and listening to that lecture. If I had been on depressed autopilot mode today, I would have destroyed my car. Either I entered an alternate reality, or I have amnesia. My main pair of shoes that I've had for years and wear everywhere suddenly changed appearance. One day, I went to put them on, but I couldn't find them in the locker. I asked the people that I lived with where my shoes are, and they said that they're right there in the locker, but I didn't see them. I showed them the shoes that were in there, and they pointed out the ones that were apparently mine. I didn't believe them, but they all seemed to think that they were the shoes that I wore every single day. I still have no idea what happened, and I know for a fact that it wasn't a prank. I think I might be schizophrenic. My friend's house disappeared. My mom was driving me to my longtime best friend's house. I was older than 16, but don't drive due to a disability. My friend and I had been inseparable for years, so we had made this drive across town many times. The ride was uneventful until we entered her neighborhood. The route to her house from there was very simple. Take the first right, and her house is at the end of the cul-de-sac on the right-hand side. We did that, but this time, her house was not there. We backtracked, did the same thing, and nope, still not there. I called her, very confused, and she told me that she would stay on the phone and stand in her front yard so that we could spot her. We repeated the route again, nothing. We finally went down the next street, just in case we were wrong somehow, but still no dice. And as a note, the street sign never changed until we intentionally went down the second street. It always showed her correct street name. At this point, it feels like the Twilight Zone and I'm kinda panicking. I'm ready to turn around and go home, but we went down her street one last time. And there she was, waiting in her yard for me. There was no way to loop around to other streets or anything, so I have no idea how we could have missed it, especially when the route was so simple and we had driven it countless times before. My friend and I ended up having a bad falling out a few years later, and although it wasn't anything sinister that caused the break, I still think of this situation and I get an uneasy feeling when I see her on social media. Lost AirPods found after 2 years. I lost my AirPods about 2 years ago, just the individual buds, but I still kept the case, hoping that I might find the earbuds again. This was in early 2022, and it's now 2024, but I still hadn't found them, so I was thinking about selling or throwing out the case. Just yesterday, I was laying in bed, but I felt something cold at my foot, so I looked down, and there's the left earbud. Then I'm super confused at this point because it's been 2 years and I never found them. And it wasn't lodged in the bed or anything, and I constantly change my sheets. I look around for the right earbud, and it was also right by my foot. Just to make sure they were mine and not some random AirPods, I've never bought any since I lost them. I put them into my case from 2 years ago, and it was the correct pair belonging to that case. What's weirder is the case and the left AirPod were almost dead, but the right one was mostly charged, even after 2 years. I'm so confused, but everyone around me didn't really think much of it. I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting? Here's a few extra things. I don't have roommates. I never let anyone borrow them, and I would know if they were stolen. They weren't between my mattress, and they were not stuck between my toes for 2 years straight. But hey, they work. Did I find an infinite AirPod glitch? This person includes edits that say, I wish I could attach images, however, I can't in this subreddit. But just to clear up some suspicions, they weren't caught in my sheets or in a fitted cover. The Find My Phone app also said my AirPods have no location when I checked them the day before yesterday. The second I found them before reconnecting the AirPods to my phone. Here's the last edit. I find it a bit tiring to reply to multiple comments, but no, my mother did not steal the AirPods for 2 years and then order some Chinese knockoffs as a cover out of spite. This sounds ridiculous, and that's not the case, as the second the AirPods connected to the internet, my phone would have been notified as I kept pressing the Ring My AirPods function in Find My Phone. There's no holes in my mattress or comforter or pillowcases or anything. I don't own any pets, and I've never let anyone borrow them outside the house. How did they ever come back to me? Changed into a body that's no longer alcoholic. Okay, so bear with me. I've always been an alcoholic. From my first drinks, I couldn't stop. And because of, at the time, religious reasons from age 19 to 27, I didn't drink at all, so I never developed a problem. I only drank in high school and figured that I would grow into it. Well, fast forward to 2001, and I'm starting to drink. I'm working in a nightclub/bar, and every night I'm getting hammered while serving. I can't prevent it. Again, I'm thinking that it's because I never went through the college years and learned to handle my booze. By the time I turn 19, I'm in big trouble. I end up in the hospital after overdosing in a despawning attempt and wake up to the pronouncement that I'm an alcoholic and I need to stop. I'm resentful and it's so hard. In fact, I only stopped drinking for a couple of months. Fast forward a couple more years, and again, I end up in the hospital, overdose, and again I'm told that I need to quit drinking. Oh, and did I mention I'm also bipolar and have ADHD? And I'm also a pill hound. These overdoses all follow the same pattern. Get drunk, get depressed, buy multiple high-quantity bottles of Unisom, and take them, and then end up in a coma in the hospital. I relearn to walk, I get over pneumonia from aspiration, and relearn everything that I totally blanked on. The first time was really hard. I woke up and I didn't recognize anything in the sense that I knew things were, but I couldn't tell you where my bank was, for example. I didn't recognize people and places that I was very familiar with. I ran into someone that I had worked with. I had been out of work on disability at the time, and they said hi, but I didn't recognize them. It was weird because both of us were wondering if we had the right person. I would see a place on a local dating show and ask, "Why do I know this place?" Only to be told that we went there almost every weekend. It was really strange. When we were leaving the hospital and my parents were driving me home, I couldn't really recognize my neighborhood or the street that I had spent years driving around. It was like I should know where I was and recognize the places as places I had been to and driven past, but I didn't. Until I went somewhere one time, then I would remember. My internal Thomas guide was wiped. And for those wondering what a Thomas guide is, I don't know what that is either. Unless this guy's name is Thomas. They didn't say. I also forgot about the couple of days leading up to the event. At this time, I was still an alcoholic and things weren't getting better. I'm circling the drain, moving out of my apartment into a room for rent, and then moving into a motel with no jobs. Finally, in 2008, I apparently overdosed one more time, but this time, it was a bit different. While I was in my coma, I was kind of able to see outside the ICU walls, and I was able to see the nursing staff going on about their business. However, they all looked like multiple layered versions of themselves, as if each version of themselves in all the nearby dimensions were overlapping. So, one nurse almost looked like the Tasmanian devil, as I could see about 20 different versions of her transposed over each other. You could see them walking around, but there were slight differences in hand and arm placements. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it was that way for everyone that was working. It was like I was able to see all the dimensions and people at the same time. The furniture and fixed surfaces were all clear, but the people were blurred. When I woke up, I had no memory of trying to despawn myself. The only time I end up in the hospital in this situation is if I overdose. However, when I told my parents that I had no memory, they both said, "We know. They didn't find anything in your system." In other words, that body hadn't overdosed, but I was still in the hospital and no one knew why. Also, they told me that one time there was nothing in my system and no one said another thing about it since. I fully stopped craving alcohol. I stopped craving pills. I went through rehab and sober living, and it was easy. I felt like a fraud because not drinking wasn't a problem for me anymore. However, over the past, almost 20 years, I've had about 20 drinks in total, but it's like I'm reset to the type of person who has a drink but isn't interested in getting drunk. I won't push it though, because you never know. I had a problem with benzos and other types of pills, but now I have a prescription and it's going unused. I had a spending problem, as well as an eating out and basically going out of the house all the time problem. Now I save money. I don't spend it at all. I don't leave the house very often, and I basically eat what I have at home. It's like I'm a totally different person. I went to school, got a degree, and basically just got my crap together. So, I'm wondering if my body, or my soul, or whatever it is that's striving to keep me alive, realized that I needed to be in a body that isn't dealing with addiction issues because, as it was, I kept trying to despawn myself. Each time I did it, the new body I went to was still dealing with problems that this last time fixed. But this time I didn't do anything different. I just woke up and over time realized that the things I had a problem with in the past don't bother me today. I don't push it because even alcoholics who abstain for a long time can have a little bit of time before it catches up with them. But as it stands, it's like I can just take it or leave it. Also, side note, do you think one of the reasons people with ADHD keep losing stuff is because their mental differences cause them to shift dimensions so often that they keep moving to places where their things are in a different location? I don't know. Just a thought that I had while looking for my glasses that are nowhere to be found. I expect them to turn up in a week or two. Sun blinked out for a second. So yeah, I wouldn't even say it was the sun. In fact, it definitely was not the sun. This was more like someone hit a switch on reality for just a second, or a half a second. And for context, I was in my living room with my girlfriend and my dog just in the other room. I was reciting song lyrics to my dog as I was standing basically between rooms, and I get halfway through what I'm saying to my dog, and click. But there wasn't a noise. It was even more quiet than before, but literally for half a second. I pretty much instantly looked over to my girlfriend, and before I can even say anything, she asks me if I just saw that too. The crazy part is, this has actually happened to me about 2 other times that I can remember. One about a year ago, but I guess I summed it up to my eyes just playing tricks on me. And another time as a kid that I can only vaguely remember. I looked at other stories about this same thing happening, and people say mini strokes, or maybe you just blinked, But for me and my girlfriend in the same room to experience this at the same time just makes zero sense. I highly doubt that we both had mini strokes simultaneously. And I also highly doubt that we both mistook something as instinctual and common as blinking for our reality blinking off for half a second. And oh yeah, this was on a very sunny day, and there was literally only natural light filling up the room. Not a single artificial light was on. Duplicate t-shirt. My husband purchased a Cincinnati Bengals t-shirt from a vendor on the side of the road the year that they went to the Super Bowl. The t-shirt wasn't a common shirt, and it was nothing that you could buy at the stadium. It's a screen print of all the top players in their uniforms. I was randomly doing laundry this weekend, and I found 2 of them. And he definitely did not buy 2. I asked him about it, and he jokingly said, "I bet it's a glitch in the Matrix." And then I started to think about it, and maybe it is. That's not the craziest part, however. I was reorganizing our closet, donating and throwing away old stuff, and I found a duplicate Cincinnati Bengals t-shirt of mine that I handmade. It's definitely a one of one. What's crazy about that part is I had taken the vinyl off the t-shirt too soon, and it created this wavy effect on one of the corners. And both t-shirts had this same wavy effect. What's happening? I feel like I'm going crazy. Cashier knew my street number. I've been lurking on this sub a lot for the last week or so, and it reminded me of a weird experience that I had that I've always referred to as a glitch. This happened about 10 years ago when I was still in high school. My family had just moved to a new house a few weeks prior to this, and my new address was 2787. My friend and I were working on a project for our health sciences class and decided to go to a dollar store near her house to get some poster board and some markers. We brought our stuff to the register, and after the cashier rang up our items, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your total is $27.87. I just stared at him silently for a minute in total shock because, one, the stuff that we grabbed was in no way more than $5, and two, of all the random numbers that he could have said, he said my house number that I just moved into. After just staring back at him for a minute, I said, "Sorry, what?" And he said, "Your total is $5 and whatever change." I paid, and we walked out. Once we were back in my friend's car, I started freaking out about how weird that was, and she looked confused, and she said she had no idea what I was talking about. Even to this day, she swears he only ever said the actual total, and I have no explanation as to what happened that day. The vehicle I was following disappeared. A few months ago, I was driving to work. I was following another vehicle in front of me. I remember the exact model. It was a brown Peugeot Partner, and for our American friends, it's a French car. I was following it at a reasonable distance, about 100 meters or so. About 50 meters before a T-junction, the road forms a crest over which you have no visibility. The partner passed the crest about 2 seconds before me, going about 70 or 80 kilometers per hour, and when it was my turn to go over it, it had disappeared. I stopped at the intersection about 50 meters below the crest, and I couldn't find the car anywhere. There were 2 houses around me, one on each side of the road, but their driveways were clearly visible from my position, and the vehicle that I was following wasn't there. The intersection where I was formed a T, with one road going to the right and the other going to the left. And both roads went straight for about 500 meters, and being pretty much at the top of the crest now, I had a perfect view of both straight lines. It would have been impossible for the vehicle that I was following to have covered those 500 meters in the 2 seconds that I lost sight of it. The vehicle was also not parked in the driveways of the only 2 houses around. I did consider the possibility of an accident where the partner would have driven straight ahead through the T, but right in front of the intersection was a large field of short grass, and there was no trace of any vehicles there either. There were no roads or paths that the car could have turned into. To this day, I still don't understand what happened to that vehicle. What do you guys think? Glitchy notebook. When I was 19, I used to draw a lot with colored pencils in notebooks. Every drawing I've ever made has been unique from each other, and I never made copies of my drawings. I know this for a fact. I meticulously kept track of these notebooks as well, drawing scenes of nature like grassy fields and forests, and other drawings of just animals and whatnot. Well, I had one notebook with a distinctive zebra patterned cover, unlike any of the other notebooks. I remember this notebook vividly, too, because it was the one where I drew a cute smiling dog with big blue eyes and goofy human-like teeth, kind of like a cartoon, but also semi-realistic. Almost like you'd see in those magazine dental ads at the doctor's office waiting room with photoshopped animals, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, my mom had accidentally thrown it away along with the trash and had it burning in a barrel, and she had just lit the fire when I noticed the notebook. But it was too late, and I kinda just stood there, sad as it burned. I even saw the pages curl up from the flames, revealing the drawing of the dog as I watched the rest of the notebook turn to ash and eventually disappear. I was really sad because I spent lots of time on those drawings, and it hurt me to see them go like that. But I got over it soon, and I never got upset at my mom about it because she already felt guilty enough for doing it. Fast forward several months, and I'm in my room, cleaning, when I suddenly see the notebook on the floor in my room. Zebra pattern and all. I opened it up, and sure enough, there were all the drawings, and of course, the smiling dog with human teeth and big blue eyes staring right at me. I was, of course, in shock because I knew for a fact that I watched that notebook turn to ash, but here it was, clean and unscathed. I told my mom about it, and she told me it must have been a different notebook and that I was just seeing things. But no. I know what I saw, and it was 100% the same notebook. To this very day, I have no idea how this happened. Has anyone else experienced anything similar to this? Derek, you read a story in a previous episode about a restaurant that was shut down in about 1 minute. I have a similar experience. I went into this academic library at night. I set up my laptop, but then decided to go to the bathroom before I began work. I was in there no more than 1.5 minutes. I finish and open the door, and the entire library is empty and dark. It's closed. First of all, was there no announcement? I mean, I'm a piano tuner by trade, and I would have certainly heard anything other than a whisper. The whole thing just seemed impossible. Also, there had been a lot of people in the library when I entered the bathroom. The problem at this point was that I was now locked in. I didn't want to turn on any lights and become the subject of a police search, so I found a window on the first floor that was open and crawled out. No alarm went off. This was one of a number of strange, vaguely paranormal experiences that happened within about 1.5 months. And, you know, they all involved locked doors. Speaking of doors, this same person has submitted another story. On the convergence of reality with media. I was working at a customer's house, a very old woman. I had to go home to get some parts, and when I returned, I knocked on the door. I heard a voice from inside say, "The front door is broken. You'll have to go around to the side." But this wasn't that old lady's voice, but instead a younger woman's voice. I opened the door a crack as it wasn't locked, and the old lady was sitting near the door watching a soap opera where that line had just been spoken. This event followed upon numerous other strange events that again all involve doors. Some of these events were scary. After a few months, these events eventually stopped. I figured the universe was just trying to tell me something, but honestly, I have no idea what. I think I glitched while watching one of your episodes. I'm watching this video, doing the dishes, and I know my phone is on low battery, but suddenly, the video stops and my screen goes black, so I just assume it finally died. I have premium, so even if my phone locked for some reason, the video would still continue. I dried my hands off, got my charger, and plugged it in, but my phone was actually still on, and as soon as I pressed play, the part of your story goes, the radio would start cutting in and out. I don't know, it was just spooky. This one comes from Sam Zilla. Hi, I just stumbled onto your glitch stories and I have a few things that have happened to me over the years, and one that involved me and happened to somebody else. Number 1. This happened at least 15 years ago. I'm used to weird things happening. An online friend from Iowa, who had come to spend a week with me in Arkansas, had decided that she wanted to go on a canoeing trip. At the time, my parents lived about 45 minutes away from me. We drove out to their house, we got the canoe loaded on the car, and my dad even came along for the car ride. At this point, my dad's eyesight had gotten bad enough that he didn't drive anymore, but he still had his driver's license. The canoe trip isn't really vital to the story other than it explains why all the stuff in my wallet was on the kitchen table the next day, and it adds to the weirdness of the whole situation. I've been canoeing since 1976, and I've been steering canoes downriver since 1978. For whatever reason, this float trip was not fun. We couldn't keep a canoe upright with both of us in the canoe. The trip that should have taken about 2 hours tops took us 8 or even 9 hours. The next day, when we were getting ready to go, I couldn't find my bank card. I had left it on the kitchen table with everything else in my wallet to dry out after the canoeing trip. I had seen it that morning sitting in plain sight. It was time to leave and I couldn't find it. We all searched the house and finally gave up, and I called my bank to report it missing and get them to cancel the card and to send me a new one. As soon as I hung up the phone, I turned around and I saw my card sitting on the table where I had seen it that very morning. Number 2. This was a few years ago. We live in a small neighborhood just outside of town. At the time, it was my parents, my sister, and myself. Both of my parents had given up driving. My brother used to live in the place next door, and I had always remembered there were 2 entrances into the neighborhood. I was taking my mother into town, and as I pulled out of the driveway, I noticed that there were multiple sheriff's deputies parked at the usual road that we'd take. I decided just to go the other way and use the second exit. As I get closer to where it should be going, I was surprised to find that there was a large mound of dirt blocking where the road had always gone. The fact that there was a tree growing in the dirt and it was at least 20 feet tall made it even weirder. My parents have lived in this neighborhood for at least the last 10 years, and they both remember it the same way that I did. Where did that tree come from? Passed the same guy 2 times in 20 seconds with coworker as my witness. I like reading these posts, but I never actually thought that I'd be writing one. So, my coworker and I were walking back to our building from one of our flight line aircraft stalls. There's a large fenced area about 50 yards per side that is the fuel farm where they keep all the jet fuel and trucks to deliver/return it, so you have to walk around this area to get to our building. As we were approaching the corner, maybe 10 yards from the corner, a tall man whom I've never seen before passes us walking the other way. He's very recognizable because of his bald head and gray goatee and rust-colored hoodie. My coworker and I were just chatting away and walk around the corner, and here comes that same guy wearing the same clothes, and he just lazily walks past us again like it was the first time. We stopped and stared at each other and his back as we went around the corner, and we were both like, what the hell? And no, he doesn't have a twin. There's no way that guy could have covered 100+ yards to come around and get in front of us again. My coworker just looked at me, visibly shaken, and she had goosebumps all over her arms, and she said, "How do you explain that?" I told her I couldn't, and I still can't wrap my head around it, to be honest. We both chatted briefly about it the next day, but I can tell that it somehow just makes her uncomfortable to even talk about it, so I'm not going to bring it up again with her for a while. Did I teleport? I've lived in the same place for 20 years now. While I occasionally pull out Google Maps to find my way to a super specific spot that I haven't been to before, I can generally navigate my way around without using maps of any kind. Tonight, I was on my way home after hanging out with some friends. I largely just use landmarks to guide myself home, and the key landmark to this particular route is a gas station in front of a four-way intersection. Approaching from the west, which is where I approached from, turning left at the intersection is pretty much a straight shot home for me, minus a turn about halfway through. I've done this 1,000 times or more, and this is how I got home from high school every day when I was a teenager. I turned left and settled in for the 15 or so minute drive ahead of me. My usual landmark for the turn that I mentioned earlier is a couple of streetlights that hang over the road. I drove for about 10 minutes, not seeing the streetlights. I thought that was weird, but just assumed that I had missed them. So I pulled out my phone to get an idea of how far I had overshot it. I input my address, and Google Maps told me to take the next right turn into a neighborhood, making a full loop and then getting back on the same road before, heading the opposite direction. I did so, and as I drove back the other way on the main highway, I began to notice some oddly familiar road signs. Street names that I swore I had already passed, and hey, wait a minute, didn't I already turn off this road? A pit sank into my stomach as the road ahead became suddenly familiar. A four-way intersection with a gas station in front of it. I was approaching from the west, but that's impossible. The only turn that I'd made was to get off this very road, minus the loop back onto the highway. I looked at the road that I had already turned onto, and suddenly, it felt much more predatory, like it was waiting for me to fall back into its trap. I decided to go straight instead, taking the long way home. Had a fun little glitch last night. Around 11 o'clock last night, I went out for a smoke. Mosquitoes are bad, and I'm underweight, so I'm always cold, so I was wearing my winter jacket. I lit my smoke, and I dropped my lighter into my pocket, as usual. I finished up and went back inside. Around midnight, I decided to pop out for one more just before bed. I threw my jacket back on and reached for my lighter. But guys, it was under the lining. I pulled my whole pocket out and meticulously searched every inch of it, and there was no hole in there. I ended up having to get some scissors, and I had to cut a little hole into the lining to get my lighter back out. This morning, I woke up and I searched my pocket again, and the lighter's where it's supposed to be, and no hole other than the one that I cut, which is in the top corner, so even if I did cut over the original hole, there's no way that I could have dropped my lighter into it last night, since I always put my entire hand into my pocket before letting go. So I'm just left here, confused, with a ruined jacket. Sadness. Frozen horse. This happened a few years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I was living with my parents out in the country at the time, driving down back roads. There are a lot of cattle and horse ranches nearby, so I'm used to seeing them on the daily. Coming around this downhill curve, I see this horse mid-gallop, and I think, oh, pretty horse. So I watch. Now, I'm used to these roads and I know them like the back of my hand, and the road straightened out after the curve, so I kept watching the horse. They're just gorgeous creatures to watch, but this one doesn't move. It's frozen in place. Their hair is literally frozen mid-air, whipping in Beyoncé mode. It stayed like that at least until I passed it, and there's no way that I was sticking around to find out why. One person in the comments offers their input. They say, "This happens when there's a UFO around, freezing time in specific places. That's how their drive works, apparently." They say when people report their cars stopped working when seeing a UFO or they couldn't move, it's not because the aliens made the car or the person not being able to move mechanically, but because they stopped time in the surrounding area. All sounds also go away when you're in the space-time bubble, which is what the phenomenon is called in the Oz factor in ufology. There was some aliens over that horse, is what I'm gathering. The blackberries didn't want to get thrown away. I'm a long-time lurker in this sub, but I've never experienced anything. But it finally happened yesterday, and I'm kind of in shock. I was making lunch for my kids, a variety of fruit, cheese, and English muffin with jam. I pulled out everything that I needed from the fridge: strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, grapes, jam, and cheese sticks. I unwrapped the cheese sticks and set down the wrappers. There was enough blueberries to evenly distribute the rest to my 3 kids. I then put the container in the sink as it was empty. We usually transfer fruit from store-bought containers to Tupperwares. The blueberries were the only ones in Tupperware, and I hadn't done the rest of the fruit yet. Next, I opened the blackberries. I noticed some fuzz growing on multiple berries, and I was pissed as these had just been bought the day before. I literally said out loud, "Well, this is a load of crap," and I grabbed the cheese wrappers and threw them away with the berries. I had to walk to the trash can because the only way to open it is by stepping on the lever in the bottom that opens the top. I plopped them in the trash with the wrappers, and I continued fixing the plates. When I was done, grapes, strawberries, and jam went back into the fridge. A few hours later, I go to the fridge to get myself a bottle of water, and the blackberries were there, sitting at the bottom of the fridge, dead center. I stared for a minute because I was confused. I opened them up and they were the same fuzzy blackberries from earlier in the day. My first thought was maybe my husband bought 2 packs, though I was sure he didn't. So I checked the trash. I literally dug through the trash. The cheese wrappers were there, but no blackberries. I threw them away again, and then throughout the course of the evening, I checked 3 more times to make sure they were still in the garbage. So now I'm all, what the F? And I'm still kinda shook. Toilet paper appearing. This is about as random as it gets, and I apologize for the TMI, but I'll try to keep it polite. I was about to take a shower and decided to pee while waiting for the water to get warm. I sat down, did so, collected my toilet paper in a good old-fashioned roll and scrunch technique, cleared the field, so to speak, and then I stood up to toss the toilet paper in the toilet, and as I turned around, I see a very neatly folded section of toilet paper just sitting on the left side of the seat, towards the middle, where I still would have been touching it if I sat back down. And it definitely would have stuck to me when I stood up. It looked to be about 4 or 5 squares neatly folded and flat, just sitting there, clean and undisturbed. I was stunned, and this is actually the 3rd or 4th time that this has ever happened to me in my life, but the first time that I just couldn't write it off. The other times didn't make sense either, but I had clothes on at the time and was like, maybe the toilet paper stuck to me for some reason. Or maybe it was on the underside of the lid of the toilet and it fell and I just didn't notice it. Nothing really seemed plausible at the time, but I couldn't count on those things and it freaked me out. So I just made myself shrug it off. Though I was a bit paranoid about things sticking to my clothing, unbeknownst to me for a little while after that. But in this recent scenario, I was in my birthday suit, and there was nothing for that paper to get clung to or stuck on as I was about to hop in the shower, and the lid was up before I sat down. And I even had taken a peek to see how clean everything was because I was making a mental chore list for the day. This isn't the sexiest glitch, but it's still a WTF for me. Has anyone else ever experienced this? I have zero clue as to what, or why, or how. Also, here's your obligatory edit to include that all of my carbon monoxide detectors are functioning normally. Graphics not rendering. I was on my back porch yesterday. We had some thunderstorms going on with rain and wind. I usually sit out there and just watch the world go by when I'm out there, or just BS with the wifey about whatever. The view is amazing, and there's lots of greenery and little critters about. But yesterday, things were different. It was fairly windy, but not at all gale force, just regular wind. I look at a tree because a bird had flown by and I noticed that the tree wasn't moving. That's odd, considering there's wind. Some part of the tree should be moving in the wind, right? I mean, that's what trees do. I start looking around and I notice that none of the trees or bushes are moving at all. And things sort of look like 2D images of trees and bushes, layered like what you would see in 2D games. They appeared to have no depth. I called my wife out because she loves storms, and also she noticed the greenery not moving, but she didn't have the depth issue that I was having. I go out this morning and I check, and everything appears to be moving normally. I had never seen anything like that before, and I wasn't intoxicated. Plus, the wife serves as a confirmed witness. Enclosures moved across an empty house. There's a corner store like 1 minute from my house. I went and got myself a Red Bull and was gone for maybe 6 minutes total. The house was empty while I was gone, and this was a weekday, mid-morning, and I work from home. When I got back, 5 of my small isopod enclosures had been moved from their shelf in the living room to my bedroom floor. All 5 were lined up against the side of my bed, and 2 were knocked over. I am 100% sure They were on the shelf when I left. That's where I keep them. Nothing in the house was missing, nothing else was moved, and there was no signs of any break-ins. I have a dog who is theoretically tall enough to reach the shelf if she stands on her hind legs, but, I can't figure out how she could have managed to carry all of those isopod enclosures without tipping or making a mess or breaking them until they were all lined up on my floor, or why she would even want to do that in the first place. And also all within 6 minutes. There was no mess on the shelf or floor in the living room, no indicators that anything had been knocked over or spilled, and the enclosures are made out of glass, and they're too heavy and slick for a dog to even lift with her mouth if she wanted to. Certainly not without breaking something or leaving even a trace of drool on the glass. But nothing. I sat in really just shocked silence for about 15 minutes, heart racing, before putting them back on the shelf and moving on just for the sake of my sanity. I still have no clue what happened. Truck in the Road Glitch, 1986. I just found this sub, and I thought that y'all would be interested in this story. 1986. I was a DJ on my college radio station, which is U of Maryland, with an early morning time slot. I'd usually leave before dawn and had the roads all to myself. My route was a 2-lane highway, 1 lane going each direction, with a narrow shoulder on either side. One morning, I'm tooling along at about 55 miles an hour, coming over the crest of a hill. Just at that point, and hidden from view until the last second, there was a tractor trailer that had apparently stalled or broken down, leaving a warehouse complex. No driver in the cab, no lights on, and the truck was perpendicular across the entire roadway. I had 0 time to hit the brakes. It was right in front of me. I vividly remember thinking, this is it. I'm dead. So I shut my eyes tight and I just yanked the wheel hard to the left. No crash. Eyes still shut, I yanked the wheel back to the right. Still nothing. I opened my eyes and that truck was 60 feet behind me, still perpendicular across the road. Shaking, I finished my drive into the station and did my show. I now am a scientist and still a skeptic. My rational mind says maybe I fell asleep for a split second and just dreamed that part, but it was vivid then and just as vivid now when I recall it all these years later. I don't know. Maybe I got lucky and my blind wheel turn just skirted the front end of the truck. If so, I survived accidentally by literally 2 or 3 inches. Or, just maybe, it was a glitch in the Matrix. Just had a glitch outside of Kohl's. So, as I was shopping around inside of Kohl's, I kept bumping into this older couple when I walked into different areas. I ran into them several times, so I noticed what they were wearing and what they looked like. As I was leaving Kohl's, I was texting, walking towards the parking lot, and when I looked up, I was walking towards a black vehicle in the first space of the closest row to the store in the parking lot. So I realized that I was getting close to the car, so I looked up, and I saw the older gentleman and his wife that I had seen multiple times in the store looking at me. so I smiled and turned to the left to walk towards my car. I got in the car, started pulling out, getting ready to leave the parking lot. I looked to the right to check for traffic, and when I looked to the left towards Kohl's, I saw the same exact man and woman leaving Kohl's. They were walking out. The man had the same white hair and goatee, olive drab t-shirt, and his wife had white hair and was wearing all blue. I did a double take. I looked to the left to where they were just parked sitting in their car, and the first spot that I saw them in was now empty. But there was a black SUV parked in the second spot of the same row that they were walking towards. There was absolutely no way that they got out of their car, went back inside, and then were walking back outside in the few seconds that it took me to get into my car and pull out. Honestly, my heart was racing as I had to pull over to type this.